Thanks so much for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Heather Sells. Thousands of U.S. military personnel are headed to West Africa as the U.S. ramps up its response to the Ebola crisis. President Obama says the U.S. will provide medical and logistical support to help overwhelmed health workers and to boost the number of beds needed to treat victims.
The Obama administration is now calling the Ebola epidemic in Africa a national security priority. And not a moment too soon. The former head of the CDC says the response so far has been, quote, totally inadequate. And new numbers reveal the staggering potential of the virus. In the journal Eurosurveillance, a publication by the European equivalent of the CDC, scientists say that if current trends continue, anywhere from 77,000 to 277,000 more people could become infected, and all by the end of this year. Those kind of numbers have pushed the U.S. to ramp up its involvement, both for humanitarian reasons and to protect the U.S. from an outbreak here.
We're going to have to get U.S. military assets just to set up, for example, isolation units and equipment there to provide security for public health workers surging from around the world. If we do that, then it's still going to be months before this problem is controllable in Africa, but it shouldn't reach our shores.
The U.S.-led initiative will cost hundreds of millions of dollars, but the president is making the case that it's money well spent, not only to save African lives and promote political stability there, but to protect Americans.
If we don't make that effort now, and this spreads not just through Africa, but other parts of the world, there's the prospect then that the virus mutates, it becomes more easily transmittable, and then it could be a serious danger to the United States.
We pray in the name of Jesus.
As people across West Africa pray, U.S. officials are preparing to get U.S. forces on the ground in the next 2 weeks. They expect to train hundreds of West African healthcare workers, erect 17 new healthcare facilities, and distribute hundreds of thousands of home healthcare kits.
The current outbreak is already by far the worst in history, and scientists warn it could spread to 15 more African countries, potentially putting tens of millions of people at risk. That's according to a study from Oxford University in England.
A new government report reveals President Obama's health care law allows for taxpayer-funded abortions. The report comes from the nonpartisan Government Accountability Office. The GAO found more than 1,000 plans in 27 states covered elective abortions, and only one of 18 insurers was separately itemizing charges for coverage of elective abortions. That violates a compromise President Obama created in order to gain support from pro-life Democrats to pass his controversial health care law. Abortion opponents say the new findings prove the compromise was just an accounting gimmick. Long-standing federal law bans taxpayer funds from being used to pay for abortions.
The U.S. House could vote as early as tomorrow on whether to arm Syrian rebels to help in the fight against ISIS. The Obama administration says arming the rebels is needed in addition to U.S. airstrikes against the terrorists. On Monday, more than 24 other nations pledged to help Iraq fight ISIS. Secretary of State John Kerry also said the U.S. is open to talks with Iran about resolving the crisis, though he has ruled out any military coordination as an option. France and Iraq see Shiite Iran as a force against the Sunni ISIS, but other Arabic countries disagree.
Parents in the Iraqi city of Mosul are keeping their children out of school now that ISIS terrorists have taken control. The radical Muslims have scrapped courses in art, music, history, literature, and Christianity. The new curriculum replaces references to the republics of Iraq and Syria with Islamic State. The extremists have also ordered some pictures be torn out of textbooks and banned patriotic songs. Some parents are opting to homeschool their children.
Those Islamic schools are a perfect example of what the so-called Islamic State plans to do with its new caliphate. But most of the world does not know the significance of a caliphate or why it's so important to Muslims. Chris Mitchell explains from Jerusalem.
When a terrorist leader boldly declared a new caliphate, it sent shockwaves throughout the Middle East. The so-called Islamic State became the first caliphate in nearly 100 years. When Abu al-Baghdadi made his announcement, other groups like Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood condemned it. Regardless of the internal competition, the caliphate would be a dream come true in the Islamic world.
This dream holds together some kind of a feeling that under the caliphate there is going to be a wonderful Islamic world. There's going to be a unity of all the Muslims. There is going to be a world power that cannot be matched by anything.
Islamic expert Professor Moshe Sharon says the caliphate began after the death of Muhammad.
Immediately after the Prophet's death, somebody from the Islamic community had to lead the community. In Arabic, the word caliph is a substitute, somebody who takes the place of.
A long line of these caliphs have ruled during Islam's 1400-year history.
This huge empire which was created was called the Caliphate, which means this huge territory with huge Islamic community at the head of which there is somebody who substitutes. Basically, they say to substitute the Prophet, but it's not true. Basically, somebody who substitutes God himself. Because God is in heaven, somebody has got to look after the faithful on earth, and of course, he is the Caliph.
On earth, the Caliph fights the non-Muslim world, called the House of War.
It's a mistake to think that he is like the Pope of the Muslims. He is a political and military leader, that under him all the Islamic world is united, and of course the war and the fighting against the Christian world would be far easier.
Today, the jihadist offensive in the Middle East stretches from Gaza to Iraq.
It's all part of an offensive move by forces that may have different names: ISIS, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, what have you. But they're all on a mission, and that is to build a caliphate.
Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg says for these Muslims, it's a religious war.
To kill every Jew and Christian in their way, and to kill every Muslim that doesn't believe in a radical way that they believe. And this is a move. And why is it happening now? In part, it's happening because they believe that the time for the caliphate has come.
Sharon says Jerusalem is the prize and world domination their goal.
The major aim of the caliphate is to rule the world. And this can be done under the leadership of one caliph who he himself only can declare a holy war, a jihad.
More than a decade after 9/11, the West is still coming to grips with Islam's holy war. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
A former State Department diplomat says allies of Hillary Clinton were part of a cover-up of the Benghazi terror attack. The official says they would, quote, separate damaging documents before turning them over to investigators. Deputy Assistant Secretary Raymond Maxwell was the former head of the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs. He was in charge of collecting emails and documents relevant to the Benghazi investigation. He says Clinton's chief of staff and other allies removed documents that would cast a, quote, bad light on anyone involved. The shocking report comes from Cheryl Atkinson at the Daily Signal. It reveals the operation happened after hours over a weekend in a basement office of the State Department. Maxwell told lawmakers privately last year about the operation, but this is the first time he's publicly revealed the story.
Mariam Ibrahim, the Sudanese woman who faced a death sentence for refusing to convert to Islam, says she relied on her Christian faith throughout her ordeal. In an interview on Fox News' channel's The Kelly File, Ibrahim says she refused to recant her faith even if it meant death. In Ibrahim's words, faith means life. If you don't have any faith, you are not alive. Ibrahim was sentenced to death in Sudan for apostasy, but was freed after an international outcry.
A new study has found fracking does not contaminate nearby drinking water. Critics in the U.S. had previously blamed underground fracturing for several incidents, saying that the method contaminated groundwater. But the new study by researchers from 5 universities found the contamination was caused by problems with pipes and seals in the natural gas wells. In other words, the gas leaked into the water only because the drilling wells were damaged. A scientist leading the study says that's somewhat good news because that type of contamination problem is easier to fix and is more preventable.
Coming up, there's a diabetes epidemic in America, and the main culprit is sugar. See how this deadly disease can be reversed simply by changing your diet. Well, America could be facing a severe national crisis in the years ahead as the nation gets fatter and older. USA Today says because of those trends, nearly half of all adults either have prediabetes or diabetes itself, and that raises the risk of heart attacks, blindness, amputations, and cancer. Prediabetes often doesn't have any symptoms. It's found through blood tests, and that means millions of Americans could be at risk for diabetes. One health expert tells the paper the U.S. is heading for much higher health care costs and more disability, but there is hope. Another health expert from the University of Kentucky tells USA Today that weight loss is the best way to fight the disease. He says it's far, far more powerful than any drug.
The magnitude of America's obesity and diabetes crisis can be overwhelming, and many people trapped in the cycle of dieting and overeating wonder, is it really possible to get healthy and to stay healthy?
Lori Johnson shows us how some people are reversing their diabetes, getting off their medications, and feeling great.
Like millions of Americans, Janet Huffstetler felt diabetes ruining her life. Then she changed her diet.
I will tell you, I have never felt so good. I think having my body free of sugar and carbs and processed chemicals has made such a difference.
It's a far cry from the fear she felt 8 years ago when doctors first diagnosed her with diabetes. She saw what it did to her uncle.
He ended up on full dialysis and blind. And he also had coronary bypass surgery, and they had started talking about amputation, but he died.
Diabetes is when there's too much sugar in the blood. The standard treatment is largely medication. Janet's first doctor put her on medication that led to weight gain and depression.
And this kind of made me sluggish, it made me dizzy, it made me lethargic.
Daily life became a series of finger sticks, constantly monitoring her blood sugar levels. Believing there had to be a better way, she changed doctors.
I came home and Googled, and Dr. Westman's name kept coming up, and I was fortunate enough to get in to see him.
That appointment sent her to the nationally recognized Duke Lifestyle Medicine Clinic and Dr. Eric Westman, who helped reverse Janet's diabetes through his diet-only approach.
Diabetes and obesity is complicated. There are lots of factors that are involved, but most experts agree that it's the foods and the beverages that people eat that are the major cause for diabetes and obesity in the U.S. And so that should be the major focus of treatment.
Instead of treating the sugar in his patient's blood with medicine, Westman simply eliminates their sugar intake.
The program is tremendously successful if you do it.
Susan Hollowell did it and went from spending $400 a month on diabetes drugs down to zero.
I was insulin dependent, 5 injections a day. The third day of my diet, my blood sugar dropped to 150, and I asked Dr. Westman, what should I do about my insulin? I didn't want to go over. And he said, get off of it.
That was 3 months ago. Now she's 20 pounds lighter with greater energy than before. Dr. Westman admits it's not easy for some people to give up sugar.
There's a feed forward, a drive that comes from eating sugar, that eating sugar makes you want to eat more sugar.
So his patients use artificial sweeteners to manage their withdrawal symptoms.
After a while, you don't crave those things anymore. You don't want it.
In addition to sugar, Dr. Westman's diabetes diet also limits starches like bread, pasta, and rice because they also raise your blood sugar. Surprisingly, the diet allows patients to eat fats, the unsaturated kind like olive oil and avocados, and saturated fat like coconut oil and butter. Although this diet may sound revolutionary, it's actually a throwback. This is an old medical textbook from the year 1900, before insulin was discovered, advising physicians to put their diabetic patients on a low-carbohydrate, high-fat diet. Dr. Westman tells his patients not to worry about eating saturated fat because the latest science reveals it does not cause heart disease.
So now we're in a phase of education, trying to get the word out on how the cholesterol in the blood and the heart arteries and all that do not get adversely affected by a high-fat diet.
So to avoid diabetes or reverse it, put the brakes on sugar and starch. It's not always easy, but well worth the effort. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Up next, an unusual peace plan in the West Bank. See the old munitions factory that's turning bullets into bubbles, bringing Israelis and Palestinians together.
They work together side by side every day, Jews, Palestinians, and Arabs.
And it's happening in the most unlikely place of all, the war-torn West Bank. Scott Ross takes us to visit the company with a Middle East peace plan of its own.
Salam alaikum.
This is SodaStream, the leading manufacturer of home beverage carbonation systems. It also has a practical solution for building Israeli-Palestinian-Arab relations.
This factory here used to be a munitions factory until about 15 years ago. The Israeli military made munitions for artillery. And then SodaStream came and transformed it into a soda factory. And we're turning bullets into bubbles. And the statue reads here in Hebrew, and you shall beat your swords into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore.
And that's from Isaiah the prophet.
That's right.
Daniel Birnbaum leads SodaStream, a company more than 100 years old.
We're at the plastics blowing section of the factory where we make more than 2 million bottles. Bottles like these that you can make soda with at home.
How many drinks can I get out of this?
You can use this to make 10,000 bottles of soda at home.
I visited its largest plant in Mishor Adumim, located just outside Jerusalem. It's an area the Bible calls Judea, and much of the world refers to as the West Bank.
So we're selling our product in 45 countries around the world.
45?
Yeah. Not all of them are getting product from this factory, because some of the countries, the Nordic markets, for example, they don't want anything from this factory. Yes, because they think that it's a discriminatory apartheid situation. They don't want to touch it. So what we do for them is we make this product in a different factory, in China or in some other location. What a shame.
Yeah, it really is. Actress Scarlett Johansson was forced to make a choice between her work with SodaStream and Oxfam, a group fighting global poverty. Johansson is seen here in this Super Bowl commercial.
Start with plain water, add bubbles, mix in the perfect flavor. Look, a soda that's better for you and all of us.
But Oxfam told Johansson her work with SodaStream was incompatible because it furthers the poverty of the Palestinians. Johansson stood up for SodaStream.
So when I came here about 7 years ago, I inherited this facility. It did not employ Palestinians, it only employed Israelis. And I decided that it's the right thing to do is to employ people who also live in the area. And it evolved into a very interesting demographic situation where we have more Palestinians than Jews.
So how do they get along with each other? Any conflicts, any problems?
Scott, we are the largest employer of Palestinian people in the world, outside of the Palestinian Authority. We employ 500 Palestinians here, side by side with 350 Israeli Arabs and another 300 Israeli Jews. And we get along together. They're not killing each other, look, okay? And when we go to lunch break, we break bread together, and we get to know each other.
SodaStream pays Israeli wages, 4 times what workers would earn in the Palestinian Authority, where unemployment is 30%. Workers say they're happy.
In the first year, the salary helped me to build a home and put a land. In the first year,
First year?
The first year, yes.
Are you a Palestinian Arab?
A Palestinian Arab, yes.
How do you get along with your Jewish co-workers?
Allah, everything is good. I work with the Jewish. No discrimination between Jewish or Arab people.
The plant produces about 15,000 soda makers a day. There are dozens of regular, diet, and naturally sweetened flavors, boasting far fewer calories than bottled soft drinks. And reusing the bottles means less damage to the environment.
This is the valve assembly room. And I call this room the United Nations because we have people from all over here. You'll see Palestinians and Israelis, and you'll see Russian immigrants and Ethiopians and Bedouins, women and men. I love this hall.
Sadly, disturbances by some Palestinian employees during fighting between Israel and Hamas earlier this summer led to the firing of dozens of Palestinians. Management says things are now back on track. Nevertheless, Birnbaum says the company is doing its part to build bridges and make peace.
So every single soda maker that we make here, every single soda maker that you would buy at Walmart or Bed Bath or Target or wherever, was made by a Jew and a Palestinian together living in harmony. And that gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, me too.
That's a miracle.
It is a miracle, and it's very encouraging to see, at least in one place. It's not perfect, but they're making an effort.
Indeed, indeed. Makes me want to go out and get a soda stream. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And finally this hour, Operation Blessing is helping children in war-torn South Sudan to attend school.
Families coming to the capital city of Juba from villages all over the country are willing to do whatever it takes to see their children go to school, even live in a cemetery, the only land available to settle near a school. But they still don't have enough money to buy food or afford the school fees. Operation Blessing has teamed up with Confident Children Out of Conflict, a local organization, to distribute food to these families and provide scholarships for the children to attend school. You can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to their website at ob.org.
Great work. Well, that is going to do it for CBN News today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
And you can tell us what you think about the stories that you've seen here. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. We hope that you'll join us next time. Have a great day.